and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and I am so thrilled to be in conversation today with Salamishah Tillet. She's got a great new book out. It's called In Search of the Color Purple, the story of an American masterpiece. She's also a professor of African American Studies and Creative Writing at Rutgers University, a critic at large for the New York Times, and she just won the prestigious Whiting Oak Grant for her next book. It's a big coup in the literary world. It's a book about Nina Simone. We cannot wait for that one to come out. Salamishah, so much. What a great year you've had. You know, whenever everybody else might be complaining about 2020, you've got a lot to show for it. Talk to us a little bit about In Search of the Color Purple and why you were drawn to this book.
Thank you so much for having me. I love being on the show, and talking to you about this book is a dream, just because the circles that I know you travel in terms of our mutual friend Gloria Steinem, who writes the foreword for the book. And so The Color Purple is a book I read when I was 15 years old. The summer before I entered my senior year of high school, I always talk about these 3 books that the trajectory of my life, or at least gave me the vocabulary to understand Blackism, nationalism. So my cousin's girlfriend at the time, now his wife for many, many years, gave me 3 books, The Color Purple, The Bluest Eye, and Malcolm X's biography. And in the course of reading these 3 books together, I began to understand issues of racism, and I went to a predominantly white school in North Jersey, here in the suburbs of Jersey. But I also was able to understand the ways in which gender and race work in tandem to oppress Black people, and in particular Black women. So The Color Purple was one of the first books that gave me, or helped my political awakening happen. And then I think I've just been chasing Alice Walker since.
And the book that you've written is so fascinating because you interview Alice Walker, you get to visit with her. You're talking about the author, you're talking about the book itself, you're talking about putting Black women, as you say, in the course of American history. You were so young when The Color Purple came out. We were talking a little bit before. I lived through that period where, we were so fascinated and so loved the book. And then the backlash began. I mean, it really was such a controversial episode. So talk to us about Alice's experience, as you describe her as the most hated woman, the most hated Black woman in America at one point because of what is in this story that she tells.
Yeah, so Alice Walker publishes The Color Purple in 1982. She wins the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 1983, as well as the American Book Award. The book then becomes adapted into a film that's directed by Steven Spielberg, produced by Quincy Jones in 1985, and it goes on to be nominated for a record number of Oscars. I think it's about 10 plus Oscars,
right.
And it doesn't win any. So the book and then the movie that comes about, in many ways, like they reach the pinnacle of what we would think of success and acceptance. At that time, there was a backlash, really exploded when the movie comes out. And in many ways, the critique of the book was things. One, you have this novel in which the main character, Celie, is sex assaulted as a 14-year-old by a man who she suspects or is told is her father, right? So we open immediately with these scenes of incest, that we later find out are sexual assault, but that she thinks are incest. She gets impregnated by her father. She then basically gets sold to Albert, the character Albert, that she refers to as Mr. throughout most of the book. He's physically abusive to her as well. So the issues of sexual assault and domestic violence are put front and center in this novel. And the other problematic plot or problematic relationship in the novel for many people was Celie's relationship with the character Shug. Shug was a bisexual woman. She was in love with Albert, and she eventually falls in love with Celie. But Celie is a queer character, a lesbian character in this novel, who comes of age, finds her voice, and finds sexuality through this really loving and tender relationship with Shug. So in the early 80s, not only was Walker breaking taboos around sexual assault, but she was also showing Black women loving each other emotionally, sexually, and socially as a way of healing, but also as a choice. And so those two things created a fervor and a furor in particularly amongst African Americans and African American male critics, more specifically.
Right, right, because many of them then felt that there was an attack on Black men. I mean, it was a huge, you know, sexism, racism, and incredible furor. You now are writing about this, what has happened to the Black woman in the book and in the America of 2020, 2021. Talk to us about what you see in terms of that, you know, development, the themes that were brought up in Alice Walker's book of the 1982 that still play out in some way in 2021.
Yeah, I guess I would say that when I read the book for the first time, that was the summer of 1991. And in the fall of 1991, a young woman had come forward and had and testified before the Senate, and her name was Anita Hill. So I think combination reading something like The Color Purple and then having Anita Hill come with sexual harassment allegations against Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas, for me, it was this like perfect storm, right? Like I read this book, and Alice in many ways is the first Black woman, or at least maybe the second Black woman I talk about in the book. Michelle Wallace experiences this with her book. But then when Alice publishes The Color Purple, and then the movie garners so much support and so much kind of fanfare, she becomes considered a traitor. She's targeted as hating Black men. And a lot of that language was then used to talk about Anita Hill. So for me, as a young person, reading that book and then watching what Anita Hill goes through, in many ways, Anita Hill was what we would call like deracialized. Like she was no longer a Black woman at the end of that nomination process. It was Clarence Thomas had the bootstrap story, not Anita Hill. It was Clarence Thomas that was seen as pulling himself up from the rural South and from segregation and achieving this perch. Anita Hill was not seen as a victim of segregation or racism, but seen as someone who was attacking the second potential Black Supreme Court justice. So I think that combination to me then gave me a way of understanding how we do and do not talk about race and gender justice at the same time. And speed up to today, it's really an astonishing moment to think about. We have Kamala Harris is the first African-American woman who's the vice president, that there's an enormous amount of respect, I think, being paid to Black women organizers and artists and activists who have not only, you know, safeguarded and saved American democracy yet again, but also are at the forefront of our most exciting and compelling cultural innovations. So there is a moment in which we're seeing, I think, all of the work that you've done and all of the work that my generation has done to really center the lives of Black girls and Black women. We're seeing some of that come to fruition. And so The Color Purple, in many ways, much of that possible. It's Alice Walker and the difficulty that she experienced, not only in the backlash that she received, but the way in which she was kind of cast aside so easy at the time, creates a different narrative for all of us who are watching that or who understand that or who learn about that, as I did when we were having arguments still in the early 90s about The Color Purple and whether it was a racist text.
Right, right. So Gloria and I were talking about you, and we're so proud of you and your book. And as you mentioned, she writes the introduction, and Beverly Guy Sheftal from Spelman does the afterward. But I want to talk a little bit about your personal relationship to the themes in the book of Color Purple, of sexual assault, bisexuality as well. You've have done such tremendous work in A Long Walk Home with the idea of the repression of people, of women mostly, telling their stories of sexual assault, of rape. Tell us a little bit about working through this book with Alice Walker and The Color Purple and your own life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things I find so compelling about the book, and then when it becomes a movie, and then when it becomes a musical, is Walker's ability to show us this journey of healing in print, right? Like I've been trying to think about other novels that can take a reader on such a significant journey of both feeling and experiencing trauma, and then finding some sort of healing or solace in community. And I think this is a gift that she gives us, and the gift that I was given before I was sexually assaulted, and then before I began my own journey of community and healing. So I was sexually assaulted twice in college, my first year of college, and then my junior year when I was in a study abroad program to Kenya. And so I think that the journey for me of healing has been a very long process, psychotherapy, art, activism, co-founding the organization A Long Walk Home with my sister, and her documenting my personal healing for about 20 years. Shahrazad is a photographer, and so she's documented my intimate moments of healing, as well as more public moments of testimony and disclosure. So I think for me, The Color Purple is in many ways a shadow text, I guess we would say in academia, a shadow narrative for the work that we do in A Long Walk Home. Both this idea of A Long Walk Home, the title of our organization, the name of our organization comes from a poem that I wrote the morning after I was sexually assaulted in Kenya, and that walk home I was doing. But I also think it resonates with The Color Purple. And on my book cover, there's literally a picture of a house, which also was on The Color Purple's original first edition of that as well. So I think what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that home for Black women has also been a site of oppression on one hand, but it also a place of remaking and reimagining, a kind of dream space for us. And so I think The Color Purple expresses that. And I think that's kind of the foundation of the work that we do with A Long Walk Home, that home is both community, home is both country, home is both our individual spaces. And I think it's been Black feminists who really understood the relationship between home and country, or home and nation, private and public, have really blurred those lines to kind of imagine a space in which we can all be free.
Right. Well, and your next book, the book that you're working on now about Nina Simone, that's going to be something. Tell us a little bit. How did you get to that? I know that you describe the altar that you have. It's got Nina Simone and Alice Walker, but tell us a little bit about what we can expect from the Nina Simone book, which by the way, the Whiting award that you've received comes with a financial support for several years to get the work, the research, and the writing done. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. The Nina Simone book comes from, I think, if The Color Purple is a journey of me coming of age with a novel. I think of the Nina Simone book as a book about me now, right? And this woman who is fiercely trying to protect and raise Black children in an age in which Black lives matter has to be resaid and restated over and over again. Also, Nina is a figure that I found in my healing process. And she's such a staunch activist, but someone who was able to be virtuosic in her musical performances, but also bold in her political articulations of ending racism, and also critiquing sexism. So I think for me, it's a really different kind of energy than The Color Purple Nina Simone exhibits. But this idea of anger and this idea of Black women's rage being a politically generative emotion has been really driving this book. And so I think I end The Color Purple with the character of Sophia, because in many ways that's the character that I come to now as I'm 45 years old, and Sophia is the character that I find to be the most, not similar to me, but maybe the one that
Right.
I'm drawn to at this moment. At other stages, I was drawn to Shug or Sophia. And so if you think about Sophia as like a fictional character, and then you think about Nina Simone as an actual person, there's similarities in those two people.
And not only are you writing and doing your advocacy work with a walk home, I love the work you're doing for Black girls now. Tell us about the Black Girls Freedom Fund.
So the Black Girl Freedom Fund, thank you so much for bringing that up. So we developed that. There's an organized group of us that were meeting pretty consistently over the summer. People who like Tarana Burke, the founder of Me Too, or Fatima Gross Graves, who heads the National
Sure.
Women's Law Project. So we were gathering and trying to figure out, in this moment which we saw of racial protest, and also a deep investment in philanthropy, in racial justice, how, or what are the ways in which Black girls may actually not be, even if they're at the forefront of our political justice movements and sacrificing their lives in great ways, how are they not, they can still be not invested in, right? Like this moment could actually, and we were seeing that there were lots of organizations and lots of foundations not doing investments in work that was gender and race specific. And so we created the Black Girl Freedom Fund, which is a 10-year initiative to raise $1 billion to support organizations that work with Black girls and support their lives and livelihood. And so our goal is to not only support organizations that are investing in Black girls, but also Black women-led organizations that are supporting Black girls. The Ms. Foundation released an important report this summer called Pocket Change. And in that report, it said that basically $5, philanthropic organizations throughout the United States basically give $5, just $5 to girls of color. So every year it's just $5 of the millions and millions of dollars that are distributed around the country. And so that's even less for girls, Black girls, right? So it's so insignificant that you can't even quantify it. And so despite the fact that Black girls are oftentimes the primary caregivers in their families, not despite the fact that they are also, whether it's TikTok or whether it's another TikTok or Instagram, are cultural innovators. And also they oftentimes are the fastest growing population in terms of mass incarceration, and next to African-American boys, the most likely to be pushed out of school. So so on one hand, there's like lots of things that aren't recognized about their gifts to society and the ways in which they actually support and hold up the African-American community. And then there's also a lack of attention paid to the ways in which they're very oppressed and they live at the intersections of violence. And so we wanted to commit ourselves and also ask other organizations and foundations and people who claim to be about racial justice to invest in Black girls as well.
Terrific. It's a wonderful, and it's $1 billion, right? Which is
$1 billion.
that is great. I love that it's $1 billion. It's not a million, it's not 100 million, it's $1 billion that we want to spend on Black girls. I was looking at some of your most recent cultural criticism in the New York Times, and I want to talk a little bit about Cuties, a film that I came upon quite by accident, had no idea what it was about, but started watching it, one of those late night, what's on the cable, whatever, and then was absolutely shocked. Because we're talking about 11-year-old girls. Tell the story of this dance troupe that's created by 11-year-old girls that really goes awry. And I know that there were protests about it because the girls were so young.
Yeah, so Cuties is a film that was released, as you know better than me, this summer, about an 11-year-old girl who's at the kind of crossroads of her life in many ways.
Mm.
She's feeling enormous pressure. She's growing up in a Muslim Senegalese household, and so she feels and her father is taking on another wife,
Oh
a
boy.
second wife, and so she's under enormous pressure to accept that reality, and she's watching her mother struggle with conforming to the expectations and the norms of their family structure and their religious background. And she's also under enormous pressure growing up in France, and particularly like kind of the suburbs of Paris, to be hypersexualized in order to get attention through both the internet and then her peer group. And so you have this little girl who really is trying to understand what options she has and what her agency is in two seemingly almost like apparent opposite forces. One's asking her to be hypersexualized, and the other is asking her to, or demanding that she be repressed in particular ways. And so she, through this very complicated and long journey of finding
Right.
friends, of exploring her sexuality publicly, and I'm trying not to give away the plot, and then
Right.
also engaging in a quite public display of twerking on stage in this dance troupe. She ends up making different and difficult choices for herself that ultimately her mother and other family members will have to deal with or support. So that's the plot of Cuties. But what was kind of fascinating, I suppose, but also really frustrating, was there was like intense backlash against
Right.
a movie, backlash that was primarily led by Republican senators and congressmen. One senator, Ted Cruz, I think, who hadn't seen the film, came out staunchly against it and was asked the Attorney General, William Barr, to investigate it. There were
All
petitions.
of
Yeah,
this,
I
I
know.
mean, it was, and all of this protest was here in America. It's a French-made film, and apparently France said
Yeah.
nothing about it. There was no uproar at all.
And there was no uproar here originally when the film premiered at Sundance. It actually received a really the director received a significant award. So for me, it was really a moment for me to reflect on, how do we tell the stories of Black girlhood, and what does that look like in on film and in film, sorry. And we
Right.
have, and I looked at a variety of films that kind of came out this year: Miss Juneteenth, short films as well called Pillars, and then also Cuties. And so, yeah, it was really astonishing. I mean, I think Black girl sexuality is such a complicated and frightening space for people to explore. Again, this is why The Color Purple is so fascinating, because we do have this coming of age of a character that we meet in adolescence, who's denied her sexual power, and deny, literally her children are like taken away from her, and she thinks
Right.
they're murdered. So Alice and Toni Morrison, obviously, and people like Tony Cade Bambara, really were exploring Black girlhood in the 70s and 80s in ways that create the possibility for filmmakers to explore these subjects today. But they clearly then and now provoke lots of controversy still.
Yeah, and what else is in the works for you? I know Nina Simone is going to keep you occupied for a while, but you're
Yeah.
in you're into the anthology 400 Souls.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And I have an essay on Anita Hill, and then I was asked to write about Anita Hill. So it was interesting writing about that period, finishing this book on The Color Purple, and then watching the election. Like they're all kind of in conversation with each other. And so that's why I was really honored. And Anita didn't know I was writing that when she blurbed the book. So she just did that out of pure generosity and goodness. So I'm very grateful to her. And I hope I repaid her legacy with my own writing about her in the chapter for 400 Souls.
Right, right. Well, Salamishah Tillet with Alice Walker, The Color Purple, Nina Simone, Anita Hill. You're really doing justice to, you know, some very significant Black women who deserve the attention. And so thank you so much for putting your writing gifts, you know, really very, very moving. And congratulations on In Search of the Color Purple, which is out as we speak. And Nina Simone, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching today. The program is Black America. I'm Carol Jenkins, and we will see you the next time.